painters, and welcome to our channel Pintado a Juego. I'm Sylvia, and in today's video we are going to show you how to build a Panzer IV Model H by Tamiya in scale 1/35. Do you want to see how we take on this challenge? Follow me! Before starting with the assembly process, I want to show you a couple of useful tools for scale model building. First of all, obviously you'll need an instruction manual, unless you're an engineer, in which case maybe you won't need it. When dealing with a model with many different pieces, it's a good practice to cross out the parts you've already done to avoid confusion. This way you will be more organized and know what step you're at. First thing we'll need are tweezers. They will help us pick up small pieces and keep them in place until the glue dries completely. Arguably, it's more comfortable than holding it with your own hands. One of the most essential materials will be glue. In this case, we are using extra thin cement by Ammo, as this is a special glue for plastic. This one provides a small brush and we found it very comfortable to work with. The advantage of using glue for plastic and in comparison with super glue is that the way it works, it melts different plastic pieces and fuses them together, creating a stronger, more resistant union, whereas super glue is more fragile. However, if we had to glue together pieces made from plastic with others made from resin or metal, we would use super glue instead, as this kind of glue only works for plastic. But as this model, the Panzer IV we are building today, is all made from plastic, it's perfect. Another thing that can be helpful, although you can skip it if you don't want to use it, is putty. This one is from Tamiya and it uses acetone as a thinner. Pay attention to the kind of thinner that the putty you're using requires, as if you use an incorrect kind, it can complicate things for you. It's helpful if you want to cover up and seal different gaps, seam lines, or some parts of the model that may not look as good. But to be honest, with this model, we haven't really used it all that much. The quality of the material is good, things and the different parts generally fit together quite well. And obviously, if we're using putty, we're gonna need some paint brushes to apply it. And to finish, we're gonna need some side cutters to get the different parts out of the sprue and a hobby knife to remove mold lines. And that's about it, so let's start with the assembly of our tank. So as I said before, today we are building a Panzer IV H scale model from Tamiya in scale 1/35, which is bigger than what we typically deal with on this channel. Taking a look inside the box, you can see there are many different sprues and the detail is really good. They are all numbered so that it's easy to find the exact pieces we are looking for and we can follow the instructions without unnecessary confusion. See, the detail is impeccable and all the pieces are protected with plastic to avoid them scraping against each other and also to prevent dust from getting inside. Here you can see all the different camouflage and painting options. You cannot really see the colors, it's all in black and white, but there is a code if this helps you. We are going to begin by building the front plate and we've decided to go with the early version, which includes this small plate with rivets. First, we'll place these bolts. Some tweezers would have come in handy at this point, but in the end we managed with hands only. Before gluing the different pieces together, it's a good practice to try out the placement. This way, we reduce the chance of placing any piece the wrong way, which would have been a problem with the glue already applied. We'll place the additional armor that I've mentioned before and move on to the back plate. There's not much to add here, it's really simple, only a couple of pieces, and as indicated before, we'll continue trying the placement before gluing to ensure everything fits correctly. Especially the first few times you build a certain type of scale model, it's important you do this, if you want to avoid errors or at least reduce them to a minimum. We'll remove some mold lines with a hobby knife, but really there aren't many. This model is very clean. But it's still a good idea to have a hobby knife around so that if there is a mold line that is visible, you can quickly remove it before moving on to the next step. Another important thing is to keep the working area clean and well organized, although this isn't always our case. However, it's particularly important when dealing with very small pieces, as right now with the auxiliary engine muffler. Imagine them falling on the ground or trying to find them on a table full of other things. At this point we could leave the backplate be, but we've decided to add the big muffler, this big cylinder that Panzer IV tanks have in the back. And the reason is simply to show you how it looks, how to apply all these pieces, which is why we're trying to add all the possible parts to the model. Even though we could paint it separately, as this piece is prone to rust and have the paint fall off, and it could be more comfortable for you to paint it separately. Here you can see what the assembly process is like. It's about 3 or 4 pieces in total, and if you prefer, you can leave them as they are so it's easier to paint them. At this point you can get an idea of what it will look like once we finish the rear armor, and we'll attach the front and back plates to the lower hull. We'll try to leave them as centered as possible and apply enough pressure so they don't fall off. We're moving on to the suspension. And here comes Gabriel's biggest error, so don't follow his example and avoid gluing these little wheels at this point. The problem is that if you build them now, it will be very difficult to then place the rubber tracks over them. As you can see here, we are using a toothpick to get the glue inside these little tubes and place the wheels on top. The small pieces we are assembling next are suspension cans, and these will go in the lower hull. After some filing, we'll try the dry placement without any glue, and then when we're sure that everything is as it should, we'll go ahead and build them. It would be difficult to make any error at this point, so we'll speed it up and move on to the leaf spring. Again, the goal is for them to be as aligned as possible. Next, we'll apply some putty with the help of a toothpick and a paintbrush to seal any possible gaps. For those of you who are still with us, here's a question. How do you pronounce Tamiya? Tamiya or Tamaya? Apparently, both pronunciations are somewhat valid. Here in Spain, we always say Tamiya. So I was surprised to hear that. In the UK, in the US, people typically say Tamaya, apparently. So leave in the comments your pronunciation. We're using the putty to cover the seam lines. You can see that we also use it in the middle of the lower hull. And this is simply because there was a line where they inject the plastic. So we try to improve it a little, but it's an area that's hard to sand down. So anyway, we're happy with the results. You can't even see it, really. So I'm not quite sure what's happening here. It seems that Gabriel is applying water over it, although there you cannot really see it, but in the back he has some acetone that he uses to soften up the putty and make the layer thinner and smoother. Here we are applying a second layer. This area is hard to see, which means that it's a good practice area to learn how to use putty. We're continuing to sand down some seam lines. Keep in mind that it's important to wet the area we're going to sand down a little, simply to avoid dust particles in the air. Wetting the area from time to time also helps to clean it and remove any rests that may be there, and to help us see clearly what we're doing. The results may not be perfect, but it's good enough, so we're satisfied with the progress so far. No idea what this piece is called. If you know, let us know in the comments, but it's easy to build, so no worries there. We'll seal it all around and put in the wheel next. There is a little plastic piece inside, which you can probably leave loose if you want the wheels to turn, but keep in mind that loose parts are easier to break, which is exactly why we're gluing it all together. And here come all the little wheels, 16 of them. Again, big error to place the wheels before the tracks. The thing is, typically we work with smaller scales where this wouldn't really matter. We haven't touched the model in 1/35 in a long time, and it shows. And this error will complicate things for us if we ever decide to finish it. The final wheel. And now we're moving on to the upper hull, and of course we'll start by removing the mount lines. I was gonna give you some more information about the sandpaper we're using here, but first, not my expertise. And second, I actually looked it up and the grid number is different depending on the country, so it wouldn't be all that helpful, really. These parts were a little more complicated. We had to remove these small bumps as we opted for the version with the side armor. We could have done it without the side armor, but it's one of the most iconic parts of the Panzer IV, so we simply had to choose that version. These two pieces, the rear fenders, were the hardest ones to build. Not because of the pieces themselves, but rather because they wouldn't fit quite right. Another way of suffering came with these fans, as we couldn't figure out how to build them. You can make some modifications with these pieces, break them a little, etc., but we wanted to build this model without getting into complicated steps. Next, we are building some accessories and spare wheels. All these steps are very simple. We've built the air filter that will go to the side, nothing complicated, and then these two cylinders. Each of them has some lines, so you know where they need to go. Here we have the antenna that will go in the back, and that consists of 3 separate parts, a long bar and 2 mounts that will hold it in place. Even though this step is really easy, we did place the side parts wrong way around, as you can see here. It helps that the glue for plastic doesn't dry immediately, so we have some time to correct an error if you notice it right away. We're at step number 7 according to the instructions, and for those counting, which is to place the driver's vision port and the additional riveted armor that consists of 2 parts. Very easy to build and place. Once we've done this, we'll continue with the hatch for the driver and for the radio operator, and we'll glue them from the outside as well as the inside to make the union more permanent. Next, we're placing some small hinges, with the goal being to try to make them as centered as possible. These are some parts that will go to the engine opening, and this serves to check and fix the engine without needing to remove it from the tank. Tweezers would have come in handy here, but oh well. You have to think what parts will be painted more easily separately and what is better to place at this point, such as the antenna, or at least that's our opinion. To build the cannon, our advice would be to apply glue all over on both sides and then clamp them together until the glue dries completely. After that, we'll only have to sand down the union a little. As you can see, we're also using some putty to cover the seam lines. We've hidden some bits and pieces in the lower hull, so we'll take them out and place them where they should go. Although, truth be told, it won't be easy to paint them later. Finally, we're gluing the upper and lower hull together, and here it might be useful to use some spring clamps until the glue dries completely. Here, if you want, you have an option to keep the cannon loose so that you can move it up and down. If you want that, then don't glue it. However, as we said before, movable parts are more prone to breakage or simply losing strength over time, so it won't hold its position anymore and it will stay pointing down, which is not ideal. Therefore, we prefer to make its position fixed somewhere in the middle. The instructions are very clear, so you shouldn't have any issues with this part. Let's get to the turret. This is the frame for the side hatch. We're surprised by the perfect fit of these two halves, and you almost cannot even see the union. Good job, TAMIYA! We'll attach the cannon to the front part of the turret next. And as you can see, our Panzer IV is almost finished. We only have some small details left. We've attached the coaxial machine gun and we'll also put in the seat for the Panzer commander. The cupola assembly can be a bit tedious as it's separated in many different parts, but it's not complicated either. If you've built this kind of model before, you won't have any problem with this. There's a small groove that will indicate where we should place it to ensure that the hatch is in correct position and the commander can look out of the tank. We'll attach the top of the turret and move on to this small back compartment. We weren't sure if there was supposed to be some gap or not, but after consulting with some photos, it seems there should be, as it's where they store tools, clothes and food. Now we'll attach the muzzle to the cannon. We'll place the hatches, 2 on each side. Their purpose was to ventilate the interior of the tank and to provide a quick exit in case the tank was reached. We're finishing the assembly of the turret and we just have some small details to add, such as the steps and handrails. Now we're assembling the scaffold for the MG34. See, it's all very easy. We can choose to keep the top hatch open or closed. We're keeping it open so that we can see the commander and make the scene more dynamic. In our case, we'll insert the torso and, with the glue still somewhat wet, we'll try some options for the final position. This is their regular black uniform, but we've painted the commander in winter uniform as well. So if you want to see that, let us know and we can upload an English version as well. And that's it, really. There are some parts that we want to paint separately, so they're not attached to the tank yet, but overall here are some photos of the finished Panzer IV with its 2 options for the commander. As a conclusion, we would say that this model may not be the best option for beginners. You will probably enjoy it more if you already have some experience. But it's a great model with infinity of different parts and pieces. It has taken a couple of weekends to build it, and overall we're happy with the results, which is the most important thing. And that's it for today. I hope you liked this video. If you did, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to this channel if you want to see more videos like this, and hit the notification bell if you want to be notified when we upload our next video. I'll see you the next time.